What's going on, y'all? Thanks for stopping by Four Pastures Farm. We hope you enjoy your time here with us. If you would, go ahead and click the like, subscribe, and share buttons. We'd certainly appreciate it. It's free for you to do, and it helps us grow. So thank you in advance for your support. Hopefully the lighting's okay there on your end. It's been cooling off here. Unfortunately, the last couple of days we've taken a turn, I guess, back into the dog days of summer. The temperature shot up. It's just hot, so we're hanging out in the shade today. Hopefully the lighting's okay for you guys. Stick around. We're going to talk about a couple of different things here. We talk about farming a lot. You see a lot of mowing videos on our channel, and we've got, as you can see behind me here, trees aplenty. We've got four pastures, hence the name Four Pastures Farm. A lot of our property here is forested, right? And so we have to, as stewards of this land, decide what we think is the best long-term solution for the forest or timber, right? And to make that distinction, when you look at what your long-term objectives are, you have to decide, are you managing for a forest or are you managing for timber, right? And to me, if you're managing for timber, what you have are trees that you are trying to develop into a crop. Let's say you want to be the provider of hickory for all your local barbecue joint, pork butts. You're going to go out and eliminate a whole bunch of stuff that is not hickory, right? That means cutting down cedars, that means cutting down maybe some oaks, elms, pork butts, maples, all these other things, so that you have a good stand of pork butts, hickory, that you can then provide to the local barbecue joint, right? That's managing for timber. On the flip side of the coin, I think what you have also is forestry management, where you manage the forest as a whole, almost as a whole living organism. With forestry, you also manage for wildlife benefits. Whereas with timber stand improvement, wildlife is really low on the totem pole. May not even be on the list at all as something that you're concerned about. All you're concerned about with timber stand improvement is what is your tree crop now in 2 years, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? So I think if we look at it from those two perspectives, you can see that there is in fact a delineation there between timber stand improvement versus forest stand improvement. We're going to talk about the different methods on how to manage those aspects, right? So as I mentioned earlier, with the timber stand improvement, you may come in and cut out everything but the particular trees that you want and then manage just for those. Whereas forest stand improvement is going to be an all-encompassing thing with a target of full, healthy forest development, including both your flora and your fauna. There are several different types of management practices that you can leverage to help with your either timber stand or forest stand improvement. One of those is certainly you can come in, as I mentioned, and cut out everything except for the desirable species that you want. There is also a clear cut process, and you see that a lot with paper mills. They'll grow hundreds or even thousands of acres of, say, pine trees. They'll be all nice in a row, and it doesn't matter which direction you look at it, every tree is nice and spaced out perfectly, and honestly it's kind of cool to look at when you're driving down the road. Unfortunately, what you end up with there is a monoculture.
Epic fail.
Right, monocultures don't promote anything to do with wildlife. In fact, if you've ever been in one of those types of tree stands, you'll find that it's almost like being in the desert. The only thing there is trees. There's very little on the ground as far as forage. There's no green plants, there's no acorns, there's no persimmons, there's no nothing. It's just trees, pine trees in rows, and that's it. All right, and so those paper mill companies will come in, and after those pine trees have been growing for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever the case may be, they'll come in and they'll just cut everything, just level it right down to the stump, and they'll take everything out there, and then you just got a big wide open area, and that's it. In addition to the clear cut that's leveraged by a lot of paper mill companies, there's also a process known as select cut, and a lot of small property owners like myself may choose to leverage a select cut. And a select cut is where you have a company come in and cut everything above, we'll say 24 inches DBH, 24 inches diameter at breast height. Get those trees out, and then you manage what's left, and that's it. On top of that, there are a couple of additional practices, and both of those have been leveraged here on this property just within the last few weeks. So what we've done is we've come in here and we've cut out a lot of these trees that don't contribute anything to wildlife species and actually choke out a lot of the early successional browsing, right? So when we come in and we cut a bunch of these smaller trees, they don't produce nuts, they don't produce fruits. There's very little nutritional value in the sapling and the bark and the leaves. There's not really anything there for wildlife to consume and thrive. When we take those out, what we do is we open up the canopy. And as you can see, just trimming these few out, we've got quite a bit in here where the sun can then shine through. Lots of light will flood in here, and oaks like this actually will have a chance to get sunlight and give us, hopefully in just a few years, give us mass production of acorns. So that's what we're doing. We'll have to come in and thin out some more of the things that we don't want. One, like these grapevines here, and this little one here, and this little one here, and some of these little ones down in here. So when you come in here and you remove all these other little ones, what I'll do is come in, and it's the same thing that the federal government does through the NRCS, is you come in and you just do a hack and squirt. And I've got some down here, we'll talk about that just in a minute, where I had a crew come in through approval by the NRCS to help control some of these, one, invasives, and two, the less desirable species. So the crew came in here and did a cut here and did a cut here and sprayed a chemical in there, and I'm not a fan of spraying chemicals in the environment, period, but it is the federal government, and so, you have to play by their rules. But, anyways, they came in, they sprayed a chemical in here called triclopyr, and this time of year in the fall, the plants are taking nutrients from the canopy up here down to the root system. In the spring, that certainly is reversed. You see the green flush in the spring of all the leaves that come out, right? And so the nutrients come from the roots down here, they travel up the trunk, and you get a big of green in the spring, right? And in the fall, it's the reverse, right? It's taking all the nutrients that it's collected through the leaves all summer long, and it's pulling it back down the trunk and storing it down in the roots for the winter in preparation for next spring when it will send it back up, right? And so this process is using part of the natural cycle of the plant, or tree in this case, to help control the canopy, right? And so they put the chemicals in there, and the tree is taking it down through the trunk here and kills the roots. The whole thing will eventually die. And so what we'll see over the next several months to a year is a lot of these smaller branches, these fine tip branches, these will actually come off and fall to the ground and decompose pretty quickly. And then some of the bigger branches will take a little bit longer. Bigger branches will take longer yet. When you get into some of the bigger limbs on some of these trees, they may take a year. The fact that you're killing trees seems a little counterintuitive, but as these fall down on the forest floor, it's going to help slow the flow of water coming down off this hill, right? So when we have all these trees laying down on here and the water comes rushing down this hill, the leaves and stuff will come with that, and it will create, essentially little check dams all along this hillside, which is going to slow the erosion. It's going to allow the water to stop, to sink in, and over time what we'll see is the canopy will open up. We'll get a good saturation of water in here, and a lot of the smaller saplings that are in here now will then have an opportunity, between the increased moisture and the increased sunlight coming in through the canopy, to actually pop up. 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 years from now, we should have a really good stand of desirable species in here. So as you can see here, within about an hour, hour and 15 minutes or so, we've had a pretty heavy impact in this part of the woods, right? So roughly from in here to right about here, about up into here, almost to the top of the ridge. With just that little yellow DeWalt and, you know, 2 tiny little batteries, I was able to clear this whole spot up in here of, you know, birch, hackberries, some maples. I did leave a few. Some of the other trees that I might have kept based on species, but the trees themselves were damaged or diseased. Those came down as well, and I stump sprayed everything in here so that we don't get a flush of those things that we don't want coming back up in the spring. And then I drug all of the debris down in here into our little ditch. Look how much sunshine's coming in there. That was non-existent the other day, right? And so right up in here are the big trees that came down and just laid across the ditch. So this whole section in here, for the most part, has been filled up with woody debris and such out of here. And now we've got all these different patches of sunlight coming in here that, you know, don't exist over here in this area that I haven't touched. So, you know, there's still some work to be done in here. I'm out of fuel for the chainsaw, and so we just used the DeWalt today and just took out some of the understory. Once the chainsaw is back operational, we'll come in here and get the rest of this cleaned up. They choke out some of the other more really? So I think what we do is, spider web on my face. Look. You see him? Oof. Yeah, I can't stand that. Woo! Gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Epic fail.
Pork butts. And that's it.